Good evening. Welcome to Thursday Night Live Bible Study. Certainly glad to have you here. I'm Apostle T.B. Walker. I want to take a look at the book of Exodus today, chapter number 17. And I'm just going to read just two verses 14 through 16. I want you to see how those connect to where we are right now. Listen, here's what the Lord said. The Lord said to Moses, write this for a memorial in the book. And he says, recounted in the hearing of Joshua that I will utterly blot out the remembrance of Amalek from under the heaven. And Moses built an altar and called it the name Jehovah Nissi. The Lord is my banner. For he said, because the Lord has sworn, the Lord will have war with Amalek from generation to generation. This is the never-ending war that's going to be there with Amalek. So the Lord comes to Moses and he says, write this for memorial in a book. There's been a great victory over the Amalekites. That's the area where, as Moses' hands are up, Joshua's out there fighting the battle. His hands are up. As long as his hands are up, there's the winning of the battle. They're having victory. When his hands are down, that's when you see the tide turning and they're losing the battle. Aaron and Hur, who are assistants here to Moses, are charged to keep his arms up. As his arms get weary from being up, they help him to keep him up by undergirding him and by keeping his arms up. So this isn't cheating. This is the need for community. This is the need for everybody working together. So the Lord comes and he says, I want you to write this down in a book. Now, there are about 5 other times where God has said this to Moses, but these are all times where they are used for a memorial. Now, I want you to get this. These are written memorials, but they also are spoken. These are things that are spoken because we're not to just get what we understand about God from just hearing. The Bible says faith comes by hearing, but they're also preserved for generations, because as we hear, that means that we're going to now pass down what we've heard. And so sometimes there's some issues, that whole thing is, once you get it, it may change by the time it gets to someone else. Well, God makes sure that there's a written record of exactly what happened. We're not to rely just on word of mouth, but the direction that we see and the events and the moments that are happening in time are meant to get written down before there's any enhancements of the history. There's no, sometimes that we can revise history every now and then and make things bigger than they were, smaller than they were, better than they were, worse than they were. But when these things are written down right now, under the direction of God, they are what they are. And these are things that God wanted to be known by all his people. You can see that there's a connection between God's people. And that connection is not cultural. The connection is not geographical. The connection is his word. The common thread that keeps us all bound together is the word of God. And when he says, I want you to write these things down, these are for all generations to see the hand of God and to see how God operates, because we serve a God who does not change, that, his ways are not changing. Then we are able to see the stable moving of God in history, knowing that if he is God in that way, then he's going to be God in that same way now, because he does not change. God's faithfulness then that is being written down is meant to exhibit what his faithfulness is going to be like in the time of whoever is reading. Whoever is called by the name of the Lord in that time is able to read the word and be able to see that God's going to do that same thing. But he says something different. He says, now I want you to recount in the hearing of Joshua that I'm going to utterly blot out even the remembrance of Amalek from under heaven. Now, this is, again, something that's spoken. This was to be given to the people, right? This written record was for the people, but God wanted Joshua to know. God is speaking to future leadership. When you look at this is God now doing the training that's needing to literally begin to move succession. This is succession training. God says to Moses, he says, speak this, though, into the hearing of Joshua, because there's some things that Joshua needs to understand. When you look at Amalek is the exact type of enemy that Joshua is going to have to fight throughout his whole ministry. And Israel is going to fight this type of ministry throughout its whole life. And every Christian is going to fight against an Amalek, a type of flesh, if you will, all throughout their whole life. And this fight's going to be with them forever. There's always going to be this fight. But God says, listen, I want you to tell Joshua that there's going to be this fight, but I'm going to utterly defeat Amalek. I'm going to destroy him. I'm going to make sure that his name is completely blotted out. Now, this means that there's a type of evil that's going to continue throughout history. And that's one of the things that God is making Joshua aware of. And it's needful and it's crucial for his leadership for him to be aware of that. It's needful. And it's crucial for leadership today to be aware of that, because every now and then we kind of think it's our job to utterly destroy this enemy. In my time, in our season, this is going to be utterly destroyed. God says, no, I'm going to do it, but this is a battle you're going to have to fight. It's not your responsibility to utterly wipe out poverty. It's not your responsibility to change things that simply must be. There's some things that are going to happen in your life. There's some battles that you're going to fight. Your children are going to fight until God says it's time to utterly cast them out. But the existence of those things in your time is not your failure. Joshua needed to see that, because there's some things that Joshua is going to fight throughout his ministry and then see, man, this thing is still here. This idea of flesh, this desire to fight against the vision, to come against the way and the will of God is here. Joshua, at the very end of his life, will come to a point where he has to confront Israel and say, listen, choose you this day whom you will serve, whether it be the gods who are on the other side of the flood. Listen, you have to choose who you want to choose, or whether you want to serve this God who's been with you throughout this whole journey. But as for me and my house, we're going to serve the Lord. Joshua puts a line in the sand, but after all these great victories, after everything he's been through, he now fights the same desire of flesh to subvert the will of God. And this was not his failure. This was not his shortcoming. God has a plan for Amalek, and Joshua needs to know that. There are many leaders out there who come to the end of their ministries and are wondering, did I make any headway at all? Did I do anything positive at all? It seems like everything is just falling apart. When you look at the church, there are people who are passing batons right now and are just looking back at the work that they did and all the glory days that they had and the things that seemed like it would just never, ever go away. And now they're looking at a church that becomes a plaything. Now they're looking at a church that becomes a toothless tiger, that no longer has any power, that does not bring fear and trepidation to the enemy. And they wonder, what am I passing along? What did we do at all? And God is simply saying, I've got a plan for Amalek. I've got a plan for flesh. I've got a plan for the conformity machine that is this world. I've got a plan for all those things that are trying to bend and pervert that which is the will and the word and the plan of God. But it's not you. Amalek has been exposed. Listen, when you see this, God is laying out for Joshua, you're going to have to deal with Amalek. Amalek is always going to fight against you, but Amalek is out now. This hidden snake, this hidden devil that was slithering along in the grass. God is saying the first thing I'm doing for you, which you have to be excited about, is that I've cut the grass. So that means I'm exposing the snakes. We go through our time worrying about serpents, worrying about all kinds of sneak attacks and worrying about, what things can happen. We get these conspiracy theories, and we live in this constant state of weird paranoia, where, we walk around as conspiracy theorists. But the reality is that God is simply saying, listen, I'm telling you right now, you have an enemy. You have an enemy who's just like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. But let me make you aware, I've already delivered you from him. One of the things I'm not going to allow to happen, I'm not going to allow this prowling, sneaking animal creep into your house, into your life, into your world unaware. He's not going to be able to do what he wants you to do. He lives and thrives on sneak attacks, right? That's what he does. That's how tigers work. When you look at in India, what they do is that they take a mask, and they'll take that mask and put it on their back of their head. It's on backwards. So the face is facing backwards, because tigers are ambush hunters. And if a tiger is aware that he is seen, more than likely they give up the hunt. Now, that's worked, in those areas. One of those areas is in the Sundarbans in India. But, one of the things you'll find out is that the enemy isn't The enemy that we have as an adversary is exact same type of hunter, is an attack hunter. As long as he's stealthy enough where you don't know he's there, he uses deception, he uses delusion, he uses your own laziness and your own desire for sleep against you. And eventually he creeps in just like that roaring lion. Except this one is not roaring. He's not making you aware of who he is. He's the angel of darkness that's transforming himself into the angel of light. But God is simply saying, I'm exposing Amalek. The thing that I'm not going to let you do is be ignorant of any of Satan's attacks. God has blessed us by cutting the grass. And just like there are snakes in the grass that are slithering around, that are trying to attack everything that you are about, everything that this nation is supposed to be about, everything that God's people are supposed to be about, there's an attack against that. But God is doing the first prong that is there for us, not just the victory over it, because God says, I am going to defeat, I'm going to utterly destroy Amalek from remembrance. There's going to be a day there will be no remembrance of flesh. There'll be no remembrance of sin. But until that day, the thing that I'm not going to allow is for the sneak attack to work. God is exposing things like never before. He's exposing governments like never before, exposing people, exposing the desires of people, exposing hearts like never before. I mean, we're able to see things on the internet. We're seeing things all around us that are being exposed for us because God knows that the enemy is not about an open attack. Right? The enemy doesn't want an open attack. So God simply knows if you can see this enemy, you can defeat him. And it's better for you to see the snake than to have him hiding and slithering around in the grass. And so sometimes in order for us to see the salvation of the Lord, you got to actually see what you've been delivered from. Many of us are looking around and like, stand still and see the salvation of the Lord, and you forget what you've been delivered from. Well, sometimes those snakes arising will remind you what you've been delivered from. We got snakes around us right now in this nation that are rising from every form and every facet of government, society, every area of our society. Snakes are being shown. They're raising up like never before. But this is what God is saying. This is what I kept you from before. Whether you knew it or not, this is what I kept you from before, but I'm exposing now these snakes so you can actually see that they have no good design for you whatsoever, that their whole plan is for your destruction. But stand still and see the salvation of the Lord. God has promised. He doesn't say you have to fight it. You're going to be the one that's going to bring it down. The revolution is in your hands. No, it's not in our hands. I can tell you right now, whether you have a TV or not, whether the revolution is televised or not, we are not going to be able to see the revolution by human hands. It's not going to happen. One revolution will lead to another revolution, will lead to another need for a revolution, as long as man is in charge, as long as there is human government. There's going to be a human problem. As long as there's human government, there will be human depravity. As long as there's wealth in the world, there's going to be those that will flaunt it in the face of those who have not. There will always be a division of haves and have-nots. All of these things simply must be. This is what God is simply saying. I want you to see what I'm going to deliver you from while you're even in it. So many of us are freaking out right now about what the government is doing, taking this away and taking that away. And God has said, listen, stand still and watch and see. The government has never, there's never been a place where man has not thought evilly continually, not devised it continually. But yet, if I kept you before, go back to your history. If I kept you before in the face of abject hatred, total desire for your annihilation. If I kept you before in the midst of a Pharaoh, if I kept you before when there was a sea in front of your freedom and I opened that sea up, if I did those things before, if I allowed an enemy like Amalek to come in, not to beat you, but to be defeated by you, if I allowed that to happen before, stand still and watch and see that I'll do it again. In reality, we only see a small percentage of what we're delivered from. Decisions that we make. I remember years ago, man, I've told this story before. There was a job that I really, really wanted. And I remember, I think I had like 4 interviews and, I knew I knocked the interview out the box. I was certain of it. I was just certain of it. Matter of fact, the salary was so much bigger than the salary that I had before. I was already spending it. I was already just planning on the things we were going to do. I could see our lives changing. And I remember not getting that job and how disappointed I was. And I got another job, oddly enough, in the same building where that the job that I wanted was. So I'd go upstairs instead of going downstairs to the job that I wanted. And this was doing the Enron scandal, and there was doing the real estate bust actually. And there were a lot of companies that had broken the law, and this company that I wanted to be with so bad was a part of that scandal. That company went bankrupt. That company went out of business within a year. The thing that I thought was like, man, I missed it. What did I do? Why, God? Why didn't you allow me to have it? I know it must have been for some good reason, but I still don't understand it. All the lamentation over, I was dreaming for a second about that kind of salary. I had never had that kind of money before. And then I didn't get the job. And now all of a sudden God was saying, you didn't even know I was delivering you. What you thought was something that, you had to come up, you had to get better. Maybe your interviewing skills weren't what you thought they were. I was actually delivering you from a danger that you could not even see. So we only see a small percentage of these dangers. But Amalek has a distinction because Amalek is the first nation that's going to fight against Israel. Right? This is the nation that's coming out, not just like this situation where I'm delivering you from a situation where there's going to be a destruction. No, these are people who are hunting Israel. They're after Israel. They saw Israel coming along the way, and they immediately wanted to fight Amalek. They wanted to fight Israel. Amalek went out of their way to attack Israel. And it's their shame and stupidity that they actually went out to fight against what they knew was the will of God. They've come out to fight against God. And so as you look at this, God is just letting Moses know, tell Joshua, I have his back. Let Joshua know. And in doing that, Moses builds an altar, and he calls it the name of this, Jehovah Nisi, the Lord is my banner. Now that word Nisi, it comes from a Hebrew root, the word nek, which means signal pole or lifted up or something that's raised. Another translation of that is that God is my signal pole. Now, when there was a signal pole, it was not a retreat, but it meant a place that you could run to for safety. God is the place that we run to for safety. He is our refuge. You'll see that same word used in Numbers 21, where it says that make thee a fiery serpent and set it upon a pole. And it shall come to pass that everyone that is bitten, because they were plagued by these serpents, they were being bitten in the wilderness, and they were just dying in droves. These serpents were everywhere. And Moses builds a pole, and he puts this pole up, and it has the image of a serpent. And it says that everyone that is bitten, when he looks upon it, shall live. This is the place to run to for healing. This is the place to run to. God is our refuge. He is our banner. He is our place to run to. He is the signal pole. When we see that pole, we know that we're going to be healed. Moses knew prayer was important, right? But he knew there was no way he was foolish enough to think, I won this battle. He knew that his hands going up, they were winning. When his hands went down, they were losing. But Moses set an altar up with the knowledge, I didn't win that battle. That was not me. This was an act of absolute worship. He made this altar and he praised God's name by saying, Lord, you are my flag. You are my banner. We work under your banner. Listen, it's easy to forget that we work under the banner of the Lord, that we kind of think we can work under our churches, or we work under the banner of our denomination, or we work under our own conviction. But no, we work under the direction and the protection of God. That's exactly how this works. This is a military victory. We can forget sometimes that we are at war. We get so comfortable and we just chill, and even when we have situations, we can forget we're at war. When you hear things that are happening on CNN, when you hear things that are happening on MSNBC, whether it's Fox News, wherever you get it, we are at war. It should not be strange to think that there's going to be some catastrophes that are going to happen, that there's going to be attacks that are going to happen, that there's attacks against the church, there are attacks against morality. We are at war, but our banner is not the United States. Our banner is not UK. Our banner is not Australia or Germany. We don't have a banner here. Our banner is the Lord's. We're not fighting to preserve a nation. We're in a nation right now that is a sinking ship, but we are in a world that is a sinking ship. There is no place to jump off. There's no nation to go to and say, but that's a nation under the banner of God. That's a nation under the banner of God. I'll go there. No, listen, you're just going to have your passport stamped like crazy, but you're not going to find a place of rest unless Jehovah is your banner, unless he is the place where that's the flag we fly. Every other flag is going down. Every other flag is going to be burned. Every other flag is going to sully and soil itself. Whatever virtue, whatever constitution, whatever declaration is made, it's going to be a lie. It will not even be able to keep its own values. It won't be able to live up to its own constitution. But the Lord is our banner. Moses is saying, this is not me. This is a military victory that was done by God. The idea here is that God is victorious in victory, and the flag of his victory is lifted high. We lift up Jesus. The victory that we walk in is not military victory on this earth. The victory we walk in is a victory that was obtained by Jesus. Listen, Psalm 60 verse 4 says this: you have given a banner to those who fear you, that it may be displayed because of truth. We are to display our banner like never before in this time. Yes, Joshua did fight. Yes, Moses prayed, but there was no victory because Joshua fought, or that Moses prayed. Only God gave the victory. It wasn't Israel is my banner. Nobody said Moses is my banner. They didn't say, hey, listen, Joshua was out there on the field. He's my banner. They recognized, and we have forgotten, but we've got to get back to it. Why am I still here? Why am I not consumed? Why am I not radicalized? Why am I not over fearful? Why am I not just completely depressed? Because of this banner. Because God raised it even when we can't raise it. When the enemy comes like a flood, the Bible says the Lord is going to raise up a standard against them. The same banner. When we aren't raising it, God is saying, look up. Look into the hills from whence come my help. Lift up your head, O ye gates, and be ye lifted up. You understand that God is actually saying, listen, I know you've dropped the banner. You know, one of my favorite scenes in Glory, you know, they ask the question if you know, as somebody goes up, if he says, if one man, you know, if this man here who's holding this flag, if he shall fall, who will carry this flag? That's the thing. Who's going to carry this flag? And someone say, you know, you hear someone say, I will. I will. And then if that man should fall, who's going to carry the flag? You know, the reality is that what happens if everybody folds? You know, the thing about a people is that eventually you'll see we all fold. But isn't it amazing when the enemy comes in like a flood? Seeing no banner whatsoever, seeing us all fold, God says, I will raise up a standard against them. I'll raise that banner up against them. And all you have to do is look at that banner and you'll be motivated and rejuvenated again. Just look at that banner and you'll be empowered again to be who you're supposed to be. Listen, it is God where the revival is. It was God that gives the victory. It's God where we receive the victory and the glory that God intends. We receive glory in places that we don't deserve. Listen, I'm telling you right now, they glorified Israel. There's glory that God wants us to receive. But there's glory that only God can receive. There's a type of glory that men can have. It's glorious to take that flag over that hill. Man, if you see that scene in Glory and that music going and them waving that flag at the top of that hill, you know, oh man, at the top of that fortress, there's something about that. But listen, you can't get victory just by waving the flag. It's by believing in that banner that is Christ, but also knowing that it's Christ who gives us the victory. You know, we sometimes are unaware of the power and the help of God. And we've got to do that, you know, especially when we work together. When we work together with God, you know, we sometimes can forget that it's not us. He has given us the pleasure and given us the privilege of being co-laborers with him. But it is God who does the work. Notice this, Jehovah Nissi came after the battle with Amalek. not after the Dead Sea. Right after the Dead Sea, it was clear. You know what I mean? When I'm Dead Sea, the Red Sea. You know, when they crossed the Red Sea, one of the things that was about the Red Sea was that it became very, very clear to everybody. God did that. God did that. They didn't lift up anything. But when they were part of it, it was clear. Moses knew right away, it's impossible for me not to give God this glory, to give God this victory. Because when we work together, we can start thinking, yeah, well, I did my part. Yeah, God bless you to allow you to have a part, but not a part in the victory. You don't have a part in the victory. You have a part in the fighting. You have a part in the prayer. You have a part in the intercessory, but you do not have a part of the victory. Only God gives us the victory. And so the Lord says, listen, I've sworn, and I want you to let Joshua know, I have sworn to have war with Amalek from generation to generation. Now, you know, we know Amalek opposed God's purpose from the very beginning. He was born of Esau and one of Esau's Canaanite wives. And he was opposing, literally from his very birth, he was in opposition to God's plan that he had with Esau's brother, Jacob. I want you to begin to see this right away. Straight after God rescued Israel from slavery, you'll see Amalek comes right out, and the descendants of this man, they come out and they attack their cousin. They come after him. They're not, based on the lineage, they're not going to have respect for Jacob's God or for the covenant that God has made with Jacob. So they align themselves with a Pharaoh. They align themselves with the same Pharaoh who sought to utterly destroy them. And here's what God pronounced in Deuteronomy 25. It says, remember what Amalek did to you as you came along the way out of Egypt, how he attacked you on the way when you were faint and when you were weary and cut off your tail, those who were lagging behind you. You know, God didn't forget that. He says, therefore, when the Lord your God has given you rest from all your enemies around you in the land that the Lord your God has given you as an inheritance to possess, you shall blot out the memory of Amalek from under heaven. You shall not forget. This was not the last mention of Amalek. He says, I don't want you to forget. Now, we know what Amalek does. We know about Balaam coming out and prophesying about the ruin of Israel. We know that hundreds of years later, Saul is going to fight against Amalek, and God says, I want you to utterly destroy him. I want you to take them all out. And Saul disobeyed. He didn't do it. In partial obedience, he allowed the king to live. He allowed some other people to live. And because of that, Amalek still was here. And so the reality is that this primary act of disobedience was the thing that caused Saul to actually lose his throne. So the Amalekites existed even after that. The Amalekites are a representation of flesh. And because of this strong command against Amalek, listen, he says, until they're completely conquered, you're going to see Amalek in your life as this picture of flesh until he's completely conquered. But I'm going to utterly conquer him. This unspiritual attribute is going to make war against the spirit forever until the day comes that I will utterly destroy him. His forever is only for a period of time. It may feel like forever, but as long as the earth remains, Amalek is going to be here because of the partial obedience of Saul. Listen, that partial obedience of Saul is very much is carried down. God says, listen, every generation, I'm going to tell you, you can do it. You're going to be the one to do it, right? He gives us to Saul, and he says, listen, I want you to utterly destroy Amalek. It can stop right there. But of course, greed steps in. All those other things, I want to be like them, steps in. It doesn't take all that, steps in. And so we don't complete the annihilation where God says, I'm going to have to do it because you don't hate Amalek like you should. I don't want you to ever forget what Amalek did to you. Listen, we're in positions right now where there's so many believers that have forgotten what flesh did, forgotten what sin did. You know, when things get tough, things get hard, people go back and begin to revisit those things and begin to go back and revise history, begin to look and say, man, those days were so much better. Those were the days you didn't have the Lord. Those are the days you were fighting by yourself. And we forget. And he says, I don't want you to forget what Amalek did. You know, Amalek constantly battles against the spirit. And God says, I don't want you to forget, because the struggle is going to be here, but the struggle is going to ultimately be conquered. I don't want you to forget what flesh did. And that's the central portion of this message where God says, I want you to write this down, Moses. And I want the people to read this. I want you to look at this Bible again. And I want you to see, to be reminded, it's not better going backwards. It's not better where we were. God is trying to let us know we've gone backwards. If you look at our election, we went backwards. We looked back and forgot what Amalek did. As you look at the way we operate in our churches, we forgot what tomfoolery did to us. And we went back to it. But God is shaking us and reminding the remnant, don't you dare forget. Don't you dare go backwards. Stand still and see the salvation of the Lord. Listen, I want you to know how much I appreciate you being here today. And I want you to share this message because I think there are lots of people that are going to need to hear this. Listen, walk in power. And don't you forget what Amalek did. God bless you. Have an awesome rest of your Thursday evening.